Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, good afternoon. Welcome back. And we did the mimer from before Rosh Hashanah of 40 years ago, but we have not yet had the opportunity to do the mimer of Rosh Hashanah and Shabbos Shuvah. Later we'll catch up with that. Now we're going to do the mimer that the Rebbe said exactly 40 years ago. And the Rebbe actually here, we mention it many times, but here the Rebbe actually speaks about the significance of 40 years in the mimer. So the Rebbe said this mimer 40 years ago, the night before Sukkos, which is the evening after the 13th of Tishrei, which is the yahrzeit of the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Rebbe, and on that occasion, the Rebbe verbringt from the early 1970s, he would verbringt before Sukkos. If you're following, we're going to use the version that's in the Menachem Sefer Mamore Moyadim, Sukkos Simchas Torah, and it's on your screen, and it's just a little bit different than the version that's still more common in the Teishvu Menachem Svaduyis, and I guess when they reprint it, they'll have this more integrated version of the mimer. Basukkos Teishvu Shivas Yomim Kol HaEzrach B'Yisrael Yeshvu Basukkos Parshas Emor, and we read this on Sukkos and on other Yom Tovim. We have the commandment to dwell in a sukkah for 7 days. Every Ezrach, which is usually commonly translated as a citizen, but it means every individual, every person amongst Israel shall dwell in sukkahs, in booths, tabernacles, the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah. And my father-in-law, the Rebbe, the prince of the generation, when he studied this verse, in looking at it specifically in his mimer, which he also began with precisely this verse 40 years ago, meaning 80 years ago from now. Here the Rebbe mentions the Gemara, that until 40 years, a person does not yet grasp properly the knowledge and the intent of his Rebbe. So when it's 40 years, it always has that extra impetus. And we've gone over this. This comes from the time the Gemara also says that Moshe Rabbeinu said, right before the Jews went into the land of Israel, that till this day, God has not yet given you eyes to see and a heart to perceive and ears to hear. So that's because after 40 years, you're able to get it. So there's a significance, and I believe it gives us extra strength and power. So now it's 40 years since the Rebbe said this mimer, and it's 40 years from when the Rebbe said it, from when his Rebbe said some of this mimer. And the Rebbe expounds, of course, on it. Okay, so now let's get back to the actual discussion. First it says in the verse, right at the outset, Basukkos Teishvu Shivas Yomim, dwell in Sukkos for 7 days. Then it says, every person amongst Israel shall dwell in Sukkos. It's redundant. It says it a second time. So why does it say, Ma bo lahisif al zeh shehizhir b'tchila b'omer b'Sukkos Teishvu? So when it says that every citizen of Israel should dwell in Sukkos, what does that come to add on what it says in the beginning of the verse that you should dwell in the Sukkos? Or maybe Rabbeinu Hazok Nishma Satan Pirush. So the Friedrich Rebbe brings from the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Torah that he explained Basukkos Teishvu that you should dwell in the Sukkos b'chol madreges haneshama hainu kol hakoiches apnimim shabachem. It says you should dwell. It means dwell with everything you got. Dwell with everything. So that means with all of the faculties of your soul and all the levels of your soul, all your inner faculties that are within you. and like the other Rabbeim explain it in several places in Chassidic, as it's explained, Gam hadiuk the Teishvu miloshen yisyashvus. This word to dwell, Teishvu, also has a connotation of being settled, of being properly imbued in something and involved. Even though the sukkah encompasses the person, it surrounds the person. Nevertheless, you dwell in it. But in a settled way. And this fact that one is settled, this affects all the 7 days. What are the 7 days? Every day corresponds to another faculty, another attribute. Shehim Sheva Hamidis, of the 7 attributes. The 7 midas. Shivas and they are the 7, they're called the 7 days of the structure of the person, which is also their own 7 faculties. The primary part of the person are his faculties, or what they're made up of. Like it's explained in many places, including Tanya, and this is also the primary refinement that a person has to work on himself. So in other words, a person has these faculties, and they have to be honed. They have to be worked to do the proper thing. That in the just like when they conquered the land of Israel, which is also referred to in Tehillim as the land of life, and of course now we our hearts and mind are in prayer with Eretz Yisrael, so it's called Eretz Artzes Achaim, the lands of life, Begashmis, in a physical sense. The first time it was conquered by the nation of Israel after the passing of Moses, like we're going to read about in Simchas Torah. Yehoshua took over and he brought the Jews into the land of Israel, and it took 7 years to conquer it and 7 years to settle it. So, Shiva Umes. So just like in a simple sense, in the practical sense, that they conquered the land of the 7 nations, and it was only the 7 nations, as opposed to the other 3 that we'll get when Mashiach comes, Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni. Now those 7 nations, Shekeneged Zayin Midas, they correspond to the 7 attributes. V'ilu kibush eretz, Keni, Knizi, v'Kadmoni. When God will broaden our borders, then we will get the land of Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni. And that's of course more west, and I think that's what some of our enemies are worried about, that God is going to fulfill this and give us those lands. Now they correspond to the intellectual part. That's why it's the number of 3, because the intellectual part is the faculties of Chokhmah, Bina, Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. So that will be conquered when Mashiach comes, La'osid Lava, in the future to come. Then also part of our primary occupation will be to conquer, so to speak, the intellect. Now we have to really hone the way we act, the way we work. And of course, it takes intellect to control that, but the focus is on our midas, our attributes, our characteristics, etc. Like the Mittel Rebbe, Rabbi Dovber, explains at length the mimer that begins Al Totzer Es Moyav, which was also part of those lands that we didn't get yet. That's how the mimer begins. So, Teishvu Basukkos b'chol hamadreg shem b'haneshama. Now, when we'll dwell in the sukkah with all of the levels of one's soul, not only will you have then the revelation of a refined and fulfilled 7 characteristics through these 7 days, more than that, everyone it says it not only says to dwell, and like it says in the beginning of the verse, but then it says Kol ha'ezrach v'Yisrael, and he uses this unique word. It doesn't always say that. Every individual is called here an ezrach. The word ezrach means, like, a common word would be mizrach. Mizrach means east. Why is it called east? Because the sun shines from there. It comes from the term of zericha, of shining, same root, zayin resh ches. So kol ha'ezrach v'Yisrael, oiseh ha'oir ha'atzmi, hazedeach v'Yisrael, v'asher osid lizreach v'Yisrael. That essential light that's in Israel, and that will in the future shine in Israel. That's why it's referred to here as Ezrach, this word. That light will also come into play if one dwells in the sukkah with the right focus and the right intent, etc., and works on oneself with all of their faculties for the 7 days. Then you get a revelation of this light. So, from this that it says that every Ezrach amongst Israel should dwell in the Sukkos, now the Gemara, the Rebbe brings an interesting juxtaposition here. The Gemara says, Shekol Yisrael Ru'uyim Leishiv Basukkah Achas. The Gemara says that from this verse we see that, because it says everyone will dwell in the Sukkos, all of Israel are befitting to dwell in one sukkah. First of all, what does that teach us in our day-to-day service of God? And why is this lesson learned specifically from the fact that it says every citizen will dwell in sukkahs? That's something which is incumbent on the individual. Doesn't mean that every individual will dwell into one sukkah. Why do we learn it out from this verse? And additionally, it says Teishvu, which is not only should, but it means will. So it's future tense. And Shivas Yomim. And in the primary part of the command is actually grammatically in a commanding word, a word that is an instruction. Teishvu, you shall dwell, and the end of the verse says Yeshvu, you will dwell. But the Rebbe will explain. The task of the sukkah is to unite and to unify everyone and everything that's in it. Move on. I know shezem ached es kol Yisrael. So from this you understand that the mere fact that everyone is befitting, all Israel is befitting to sit in one and to dwell in one sukkah, that means that the sukkah unites all of Israel. The idea and ultimately a physical sukkah, it would be very big. But even if it's not a physical sukkah, it's the idea of the sukkah and the mitzvah of the sukkah. And it's a mitzvah that unites them. This is already something that they're learning it from the verse when the mitzvah is in effect, which is now. It doesn't only mean that when Mashiach comes and there will be this great sukkah. So the idea of dwelling in one sukkah is already in play now, because we already have the command that every Ezrach has to dwell in a sukkah. And on sukkahs, it's a mitzvah to dwell in the sukkah. So it's a mitzvah that unites us all. So we're united mitzvah through the Torah and its mitzvahs. And although the Gemara says it's an easy mitzvah, and there the context of the Gemara is that there are those that nevertheless they didn't want the other nations didn't want to do it, even though it's an easy mitzvah, quote unquote. And a light mitzvah too. Kala means it's light, it's simple. In other words, the Rebbe is bringing out here that even though it's a mitzvah kala, but it's its impact is very significant. But we'll have the ultimate of this, that it will unite us all when the future to come, as it's explained at length in the Mamorim and Chassidus of the Rebbe Rashab, and in several places in Chassidus. This whole idea is also stressed by the mitzvah of taking the 4 kinds in the sukkah. I should say by it's a hidur mitzvah. It's a special way to take the lulav and esrog in the sukkah. You could do it anywhere, but it's preferable to do it in the sukkah. So this whole idea, this lesson of what will happen, of what we're able to glean and gain from dwelling in the sukkah, is stressed and it's magnified through the mitzvah of taking the lulav in the sukkah. Kamuva gam b'sidar mur hazoken. Shemitzvahs nititlasim b'sukkah mitzvah min hamuvchar, like it says in the Alter Rebbe Siddur, that the mitzvah to take the 4 kinds and in the sukkah is the way to do the mitzvah in the best way possible, the choicest way. And here the Rebbe mentions, like the one whose yahrzeit it is, because it's the yahrzeit of the Rebbe Marash on the 13th of Tishrei. So, as the one who's the Bal Hilula, the one whose yahrzeit it is, expounds on this at length in his continuum of Mamorim that begin with V'kocha. That's the first mimer, and that was in 1877, Tofish Lamed Zayin. V'masha kosav v'lekachtam l'cham b'yem harishon. I want to say just parenthetically here that many times when the Rebbe himself went out to the sukkah in the morning to bench esrog, he took with him this sefer of the Rebbe Marash. We saw him holding his esrog box together with this book. And in the earlier years, when the Rebbe himself supervised as people and shared his lulav, he was actually learning from this sefer too. But here the Rebbe mentions it, and the Rebbe says, like he expounds at length, it says in the verse that gives us the mitzvah of taking the 4 kinds. And you'll take for yourself on the first day a fruit of the tree, which is beautiful, and the branches of the date palm, and twigs of a tree which is thick, and willows of the river. And that's of course a reference to the esrog, the lulav, the hadassim, the myrtles, and the willows. So the citron, the palm, the myrtles, and willow. Why were these 4 chosen? And he explains, the Marash explains, it's also explained by the Middle Rebbe, Rabbi Dover in the Siddur, which is called the Siddur in Dach, which we already are familiar with from the Maimer of Rosh Hashanah, that he published the Torah of the Alter Rebbe, his father, in the context of the Siddur too. So, what is special about these 4 kinds in relative to all the other types of vegetation is because each one of these has an element of unity within its, I guess, botany, within the way it grows. And he quotes also the pertinent pieces in the Talmud and explains at length regarding an esrog, the citron. Esrog is able to survive, not only survive, but also thrive in all of the seasons of the year. It's I believe, the only fruit that does this. And indeed, I had the opportunity to see this in Calabria, where we get the esrogim in the south of Italy. You have a question? Huh?
Right.
Huh?
Right.
So I see on the tree there's a very huge esrog, this big, and father-in-law Zalzang Yezund, who's sent by the Rebbe there to pick a sorghum, said, because it's last year's crop, so it got bigger and bigger. We're on page Kuf Mem Dalet in the middle. So the esrog is able to unite all the seasons of the year, all times of year. It thrives in spring, summer, fall, and winter. And even the Torah also really has 6 seasons, when it's very harsh winter and very hot in the summer. So that's the first piece of unity, the esrog, the Chol HaShana, Mebli Habit Al Shinuyim, without looking at the various changes in temperature and the weather. Not only that doesn't bother it, on the contrary, it increases and it's able to thrive and grow from the various seasons. Each season adds something to the esrog. And similarly, when it says a branch of the date palm, choser, kapois ksiv. The word kapois in the Torah is written without a vav. So, which shepirusha kofus, what it means is something which is tightly together, and without the vav, it symbolizes that it's something that it's fused totally. It's also united, and that literally means the way that lulav is, all of its leaves are stuck together. Anaf eitz ovis. So also the twig, the branch of the thick tree, the tzarchlis tlasa b'chadikina, the hadassim, the myrtle grows that 3 leaves encircle the twig that it's holding. So they're all coming out of one spot on the bottom, so you don't even see the twig. It's all looks like one big chain, one thing. V'arvei nochal, and the willows of the river, shegdelim ba'achvana. Those grow on trees that come in clusters and groups of trees that are like brotherhood. They're all together. So this is all symbols of unity. And especially so, number 1, we already see the unity in each one of the kinds. Then the Rebbe right here doesn't mention it, but it's obvious that you have to take all the kinds and put them all together. That's another symbol of unity. And then we have to do what's called the nanuim. We have to wave the 4 kinds. And here the Rebbe mentions what's the custom of Chabad, and here he explains why. And we bring them to the heart, close to the heart, on the chest. From this we can understand the connection from the 7 days of Sukkos to the 7 attributes of the person which are seated in the heart. Everything becomes encompassed by a mitzvah, and then, because we are in the sukkah when you do it, and then it's drawn into the heart. That's where we touch the heart with the lulav. And then this affects how one acts the whole year. Unity is connected with the level of das. Das is knowledge. Knowledge is the 3rd level, which is also rooted in the higher level. Chabad stands for Chochmah Bina Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Das is the result. You know it. After one has been toiled from the idea and the development, that's the Chochmah and the Bina, then you have the result. When it's just a goal, it's Keser Chochmah Bina. That's one way of looking at it, at least. And then das means that there's a result, that you have it, this ownership. There's another verse that says you should dwell in the continuation of this verse that we said over here. It's the next verse. It says, you should dwell in the Sukkos for 7 days, so that your generations will know. L'man yedu. That's das. Hainu shemitzah sukkah tzrich lifel inyan hadas. Yedu deresechem. The mitzvah of sukkah has to bring this result. You have to have ownership. You have to know it. It's something that you have. V'ad kedei kach shal yisei pirush haposuk betam mitzvah sukkah nifsek v'shulchan aruch sheyediya zu l'man yedu deresechem hilerek inyan shel kavonas ha-mitzvah v'sulei elazeu chelik mikiyim ha-mitzvah k'mei b'mitzvah tzitzis chiyetza v'zeh. Here's a concept that the Rebbe says, to the extent that you have to know that it's that because of this verse and the explanation of what this verse means, that it says you should dwell in Sukkos so that your generation should know. So that's a reason of why the mitzvah is done. So the Shulchan Aruch says that the knowledge of this fact, so that we know that God protected us when He took us out of Egypt with Sukkos, whether it means clouds of glory or booths, whatever it may be, but it was God's protection. So that knowledge is part of the fulfillment of the mitzvah. That the subsequent generations are aware of this and know about this. So it's not just an intent of why we do the mitzvah and nothing more, but on the contrary, part of fulfilling the mitzvah is to be cognizant and aware of the fact that this mitzvah is to remember the protection that God protected us on our way out of Egypt. And it's similar to the mitzvah of tzitzis, that part of the mitzvah of filling tzitzis is to wear it and that it reminds us of the other mitzvahs. As it's explained in the halachic authority, the Bach, and the Alter Rebbe brings it in his Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, L'Psak Din Halacha, as a halachic ruling, B'Pirish HaPasuk Basukkos Teishvu Yomim, when he explains this verse of you should dwell in Sukkos for 7 days, so that the generations know. Now the Rebbe explains. What's it all about? Again, like the Rebbe Marash, whose yahrzeit it is, explains at length in the continuum. The sukkah has a resemblance in a certain sense. It's like the ark of Noah, Noah's ark. Why? Because Noah's ark, remember, everyone lived together nicely. All the animals lived in peace. Everything was special. Shagam Hikshurim Sfiris Habina, which is also connected to the idea of understanding. Proper understanding is the idea of tolerance to understand. Shahoyis Hashem B'Shleimusa. It was there in its ultimate, in its fullest, and the tolerance comes with understanding. Shahoyu kol hachayis v'chol habehemis yachtov. All of the animals and the beasts, all the beasts and all the wild beasts and the animals were all together. V'im kol zeh li'osor zelazeh. They didn't harm each other. They didn't do anything bad to each other. Kalal at all. V'leishchisu zelazeh. They didn't destroy each other. Me'ein mashkosav la'ased lavei. Like a little bit, like it says in the prophecy in Isaiah of what will be in the future to come when Mashiach comes. V'gor ze'evim keves, and the wolf will live with the lamb. V'lo yoreyu v'lo yashchisu b'chol har kodeshi. They won't do anything bad or destructive on all of my holy mountain. Shalachein lo sid lo v'li yasham chulu v'lo kinu lo yisachrus. It says in the Rambam, says that in the future to come there won't be any war and any of these type of negative things, and there won't be jealousy and there won't be competition. The whole Pratin Yonam Shabbasim Sefer HaRambam with all the other details that the Rambam brings there at the end. V'tamadavar, what's the reason for this? Ki shezehu loshen shel nesinas tam. When it says because, so that's a reason. It says, the verse says, they won't do anything bad or destructive. Why? Why won't they be like that? Why won't they be destructive? Because the earth will be full of knowledge of God, like the water covers the seabed. Which means that in the future to come, there will be this unity in its ultimate. Because then it will have the ultimate of knowledge, which is the result of the understanding and the wisdom, etc. And since one has to prepare in a way that is similar to what is being prepared for, like the Rebbe says, that the Gemara says that it's a medrash that says that when Mashiach comes, there's going to be a very special competition. There's actually a nice Yiddish song about this too. and there's going to be a spectacle that the righteous will be able to watch, where the great Shur Habor, the great ox, is going to have a competition with this great big fish called the Leviathan, the Leviathan, and the Leviathan is going to slaughter the ox, and the ox will gore the Leviathan. They're both going to be deceased, and then it's going to be a big meal made from this fish and that beef. So, and that's going to be in a very big party for the righteous. And it says then that they're going to make from the skin of that fish, they're going to make a big sukkah. So that's one of the prophecies when Mashiach comes. How exactly that works, we'll merit. We'll work real hard. We'll get to witness this and see exactly how it works. Otherwise, we don't have to figure out the exact mechanics. What we do have to figure out is how to make a real sukkah for now, and that's what the Rebbe says here. So, the preparation for sitting in the sukkah, made from the skin of the Leviathan, through fulfilling the mitzvah of the sukkah now, by taking your boards and whatever it may be. Well, just like we have to also prepare for the time when the world will be full of the knowledge of God. This comes through spreading the wellsprings of Chassidus to the outside, because Chassidus talks about God and expounds on the knowledge of God, and that's the primary thing that will happen when Mashiach comes. So the preparation is to learn Chassidus now, in a way that you understand it and grasp it in our own intellectual minds. In our own wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. We need these partners from Menachem. This is the way, like it says in the Zohar, that one could take sustenance from this knowledge, from this way of learning Chassidus. Like the commentaries in the Zohar explain, when we say sustenance, it also is the idea of food. Food sustains the person. In the Talmud in Shivas, it says, we're speaking about that someone has to give the word parnasa, we usually say as make a living, right? It also means to sustain. And sustenance, there it says, well, the primary thing that has to be provided for is a person's food. And the main needs of necessities of the person. So this word for parnasa, which we use colloquially as to make a living, but it means this idea that it becomes part of you. So he's saying that if this knowledge of God will support you, it really becomes part of you like food. It becomes blood, flesh and blood, like one's own flesh. When this will become part of you, when you study Chassidus to that extent, like it says in the Zohar, then Israel will go out of exile with great mercy, and like the Alter Rebbe brings in the letter, chapter 26 in the Holy Letters in the end of Tanya, he explains this. We're going to learn it soon. And at that time we'll have the fulfillment of the verse in Isaiah, that those who are reposing in dust will once again get up and rejoice. And the one who had the yard site will also be amongst them. That's the Rabbi Rashbi, the author of the Zohar, and all the Rebbeim will also be there. And Moses and Aaron with them. Like the Gemara says explicitly, that when Mashiach comes, Moshe and Aaron will be there right away. The Gemara in Yoma, speedily in our days. So, just a quick, we're off.